My Lords, I rise to support Amendment 15, which I think is absolutely vital. Every time I look at the title of this bill, I get irritated because there is no such thing as sustainable aviation fuel, and we really ought to accept that. Too often we have these grand promises that are never backed up, and I would argue that carbon capture and storage is another one. But if the government are to press ahead with so-called sustainable aviation fuel, the very least we should expect is full transparency about what is being produced, where it's coming from, and what the real impacts are. Reporting on UK sustainable fuel production gives Parliament the ability to see whether this industry is genuinely delivering any climate benefits, or whether we're simply shifting emissions, land pressures, and environmental harms elsewhere. As one expert put it, we're not about to start eating more chips, so we will have to import more waste oil. And what if rising European demand for so-called waste oil is being met with virgin palm oil fraudulently passed off as waste? If that's happening, and studies do suggest it is, then any emissions savings vanish, replaced by deforestation for palm oil plantations. Plus, most of our waste cooking oil is currently used in road transport fuels, so diverting it into aviation simply shifts emissions elsewhere, and nothing actually shrinks. Parliament should not be expected to take the government's optimism on trust. We need to see what's really happening. And this Amendment 15 provides at least a little transparency, accountability, and a dose of realism, three things that are too often missing from aviation policy. And if the government believes that sustainable aviation fuel will play a meaningful role in decarbonising aviation, then they should have no hesitation in reporting openly and regularly on its progress. Now, on 19A, my own amendment, this amendment asks the Secretary of State to do something that should already be at the heart of a bill like this, to acknowledge that what we do here, what we incentivise, what we subsidise, what we label as sustainable, has real consequences for land, forests and communities here and far beyond our shores. Sustainability doesn't stop at the White Cliffs of Dover. Protecting land over here while outsourcing environmental destruction over there is not sustainability, it's hypocrisy. Supporting crop-based aviation fuels risks taking land away from food and from nature. It risks fueling deforestation, especially in the global south, where communities are already living with the impacts of land grabs and ecological collapse. Yet this bill encourages exactly that. We're using land, or talking about land, as if it were an infinite resource, and it most definitely isn't. Land is already under enormous pressure from farming, housing, biodiversity loss, and climate breakdown. Turning that precious land over to growing crops for climate-destroying fuel makes absolutely no sense. My amendment requires the government to publish an assessment of how the revenue support mechanism for so-called sustainable aviation fuel is affecting land use internationally, including whether it's driving deforestation or other damaging land use change. Parliament deserves to know if we're simply shifting environmental harm onto other countries while congratulating ourselves on green progress. And even if we overlook the land use impacts, and we shouldn't, this bill will not do anything to actually reduce air travel emissions. Sustainable aviation fuel, as described here, is at best a drop in the ocean, a drop in a rapidly rising ocean. A clever accounting trick won't cool the planet, nor will a marginal fuel switch deliver any sort of emissions reductions we need. One analysis of sustainable fuel shows carbon emission savings are almost entirely wiped out by the rising demand for air travel. As Professor Bill Rutherford of Imperial College said it, the only way you can make aviation any more sustainable is to do less of it. Every hectare of land used to grow fuel crops risks locking us further into a system that protects the freedom of frequent flyers rather than the future of planet. And my apologies, I did not thank the noble Earl Baron Russell for his support for my amendment.